So I started a series and I called it Idiot's Guide to Intelligence a few weeks back, and it's meant to provide some background information, criticisms, and overall facts to be aware of with regards to IQ tests in general. The first part consisted of an overview of the history of intelligence testing, as well as the various IQ tests out there in current year, January 2018, available to you to take, and under what criteria they tested in order to calculate your final IQ scores. So let's get right into it then. One thing to be aware of is the simple fact that IQ scores can change, at least according to a 2001 study that can be found in the description along with all of my other sources for you to peruse at your leisure. Anyway, the study was called Stability and Change in Children's Intelligence Quotient Scores, a comparison of two socioeconomic disparate communities. In this study, researchers assessed the IQ scores of both low and normal birth-weighted children from both urban and suburban areas in the city of Detroit, Michigan, at the age of 6, and then again at the age of 11. The total number of subjects from which data was collected was 717. They used the WISC form of the IQ testing, which is specifically designed to evaluate children of that age range. Now, why are we looking at a study for children? You might be asking. Well, I'll tell you, because most development, and yes, obviously physical, but definitely mental, happens in your younger years. An obvious example of this playing out in action over the course of your life is, of course, language development. The language you learn as a child is the language you will speak for the rest of your life. But also, some of you are aware that there is a popular idea that the optimal age range to teach someone a second language is within the first 20 years of their life due to a child's neuroplasticity. Furthermore, and this should be more obvious, the key to early language learning is better facilitated, and in fact it requires social environment. After all, practice makes perfect. And as a result, socioeconomic status has some correlative relative nature that pertains to language acquisition. See Cool 2011. This will become more relevant later on, I promise you. So let's get to the actual study that I wanted to talk about. Here we have the breakdown in data with regards to the breakdown of subjects, so you can get an understanding of the variety of subjects tested. So it covers things like race, education of mother, marital status of mother, birth weight, APGAR scores, and size. Now you can feel free to pause to look at the information. The link to the actual table itself will be in the description if you feel the need to look at it for yourself. I would just like to point out a few data points that I think would be relevant to what I'm going to be talking about. Keep in mind, these are percentages, not the actual numbers, so feel free to do the math for yourself if you would like to know precisely how many of the participants fell into each category. There's the obvious data point, and that being that there are higher percentages of members of non-white race in the urban setting rather than the suburban setting. Now we get to the more interesting data on the data table. I feel more interesting, and that is the mother's education. And you will notice that on the urban side, the percentage of women who receive less than a high school degree is a great deal higher than the number of suburban women who do not. We keep going up, and the numbers seem to counter each other almost. If I were to put it on a line graph, it would look like this. Notice that in terms of education, urban mothers tended to have less than a high school diploma, as well as not have completed college when compared to suburban women. Another fact that I think you should be aware of is this. We also know that education levels and annual salary are correlated. That is to say, if you receive less than a high school diploma, your annual income will flake. Whereas if you have a higher level of education, such as a bachelor's, you will have a significantly higher annual income. Thank you, Bureau of Labor Statistics 2014. Should be a no-brainer. Another thing I'd like to point out is the parentage of the subjects. Notice that the urban children analyzed in the study, 58.1% of the 374 children were being raised in single-parent homes, namely under the care of the mother, whom we know was less likely to be educated, as opposed to the 9.7% of suburban children raised by single mothers. So what are both of these two factors that we've been presented with? Education and parental status, that is, one parent as opposed to two. Definitely not genotypic or phenotypic, nothing to do with race or genetics in the slightest, necessarily at all. Merely the circumstances of one's own life. Keeping in mind that, we're going to go ahead and observe the next table, which is the IQ scores across birth weight and setting compared to the scores of children from ages of 6 to 11. In the urban community for low birth weight on a full-scale IQ test, you will notice that from the first to the second score, there is a point decrease of about 5, from 93.1 to 88.1. Whereas in the suburban setting, there is a 0.8 increase, from 107 to 107.8. That second change being a rather insignificant adjustment, to be frank. I mean, come on, less than 1 point. And moving on to the normal birth weight category and their respective scores. Once again, in the urban setting, there is an IQ decrease of about 5 points, and at the same time in the suburban setting, there was a decrease of about 0.5 from the ages of 6 to 11. Now, what do these results tell us? That is the question I'm concerned with. And they tell us a few things, actually. One, that there is a decline in IQ for urban children over this time period, so my point stands that IQ scores can change. However, no real significant change for suburban children. 2, the urban children generally have a lower IQ than suburban children. Now, this is kind of a two-tier video since we're talking about not just changing IQ, but maybe a reason why IQ scores might lessen, in a sense. Why would this be? Well, I have a few theories. One of my theories goes back to the relationship I mentioned earlier between socioeconomic background and language acquisition, and by extension, cognitive function overall. That last one we'll be talking about more in depth in a following point. We do know that children residing in more impoverished lifestyles, quote, poor children experience less social support and their parents are less responsive and more authoritarian. Low-income children are read to relatively infrequently, watch more TV, and have less access to books and computers. Low-income parents are less involved in their children's school activities, which means that they're not receiving that crucial out-of-school, at-home attention and extra help that's, essential to their development. Which, if you've ever had a kid and or taken classes on how to be a successful parent or developmental psychology at all and stuff like that, that is a big bag ball of balloons. Alliteration. This, of course, does not bode well for children's social development, nor does it aid them in their mental development, much less in their language acquisition. This should be obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. The key to a healthy mind is for it to be engaged. I'll say it again. The key to a healthy mind is for it to be engaged. For example, if you've ever, say, learned an instrument or learned the states and capitals perfectly, and then went a few months at least without practicing your instrument or studying your states and capitals, do you think you could play just as well as you did when you practiced every day for an hour, or name all 50 states and capitals first try, no help, and no prep? Of course not. Hence, a child who's not being engaged with on a level that they should be will not perform at the same level as other children who were engaged with correctly by their parents. I'm not telling anyone how to parent their child, I'm just saying there's a correct way to do things. I'm just kidding. But don't take my word for it. Take the study done by Ybarra et al. 2007, which found a positive relationship between social interactions assessed via the amount of social contact and cognitive function in people of 3 age groups, including younger adults. Of course, all of my extra hullabaloo about parental interaction aiding in social facilitation and potentially increasing test scores is me just buttering you up for the next inconvenient truth that you're going to have to face, which is this. Certain stressors like social deprivation or isolation have been found to reduce IQ in retards. Yes, I said retard. Sue me for using the technical term. Also, yes, I know it's not general population per se I'm talking about, but this will become relevant later on. According to this study, the non-familiars were characterized by less severe pre-institutionalized deprivation. Through the course of institutionalization, increased greater losses of IQ. Magnitude of IQ decrease was related to the degree of pre-institutional deprivation among both families and non-familials. Here's where I feel the need to insert a disclaimer. Keep in mind, on a few of these studies, I can only read the abstracts of various studies because I am a poor college student who cannot afford to buy every single study she needs to read for a video on IQ. Despite my paying several tens of grands a year for freaking university email address. That means that you and I should both take these studies with a grain of salt, seeing as how they otherwise are inaccessible to moi. Now, that begs the question, why am I telling you guys this? Well, because I'd feel dirty and dishonest if I didn't tell you and just read off the abstracts, and a few of you actually thought that I had looked in depth into these studies to make sure that they weren't utter bullshit when I actually cannot. Granted, if any of you can actually look into these, please do. All of those links I've used are in the description. With all that has been previously said about my previous point, the one that I can't read all of these studies, I am, in fact, however, inclined to assign some manner of legitimacy to the statement that social deprivation can reduce IQ, keeping in mind that IQ is supposed to be a measure of human intelligence. A better way to phrase this inconvenient truth that I initially stated is stressors can lower cognitive function, which, well, we kind of need in order to gauge semblance of intelligence on IQ tests. With this statement in mind, we do know that, thanks to a study conducted in 2008, Freeze et al., cortisol regulation was assessed both basally and following standardized interpersonal interactions between the child and her mother and the child and an unfamiliar adult. Post-institutionalized children showed prolonged elevations in cortisol levels following the mother, but not the stranger, interactions. More severe neglect was associated with the highest basal cortisol levels and the most impaired cortisol regulation following the mother interaction. These results suggest that early social deprivation may contribute to long-term regulatory problems in the stress-responsive system, and that these differences are most evident within the context of ongoing close interpersonal relationships. Now, you might be asking me, why the fuck does this matter, Weebo? You also may be asking, what is cortisol? It's commonly referred to as the stress hormone. It controls blood sugar levels, regulates metabolism, helps reduce inflammation, and the most important one, assists with memory formulation. So, these children are stressed out in the prolonged sense due to stress from poverty, separation, isolation, the fact that mommy is never there because she's working 2 jobs to support your happy ass, and daddy has never been there, etc. I don't need a study for me to tell you with certainty that these factors can cause stress, especially in a child. That's not good, but let's take a gander at the long-term effects of prolonged stress or heightened cortisol levels. To most of you, this might not come as a shocker because I briefly touched on it earlier, but also because you live and breathe and experience stressors on the daily of some nature, but psychological stress can pretty much affect any aspect of your body, whether it be your metabolism, your blood sugar, or go figure, your memory. Don't believe me? Oye et al. 2006, psychosocial stress impairs working memory at high loads in association with cortisol levels and memory retrieval. What they found was high cortisol levels at the time of testing were associated with slow working memory performance at high loads and with impaired recall of moderately emotional but not highly emotional paragraphs. Furthermore, performance at high working memory loads was associated with memory retrieval. These data extend previous results of pharmacological studies in finding working memory impairments after acute stress at high workloads and cortisol-related retrieval impairments. And I'm feeling really lucky, so let's say double or nothing, Kuhlman et al. 2005. Impaired memory retrieval after psychosocial stress in healthy young men. In the present study, 19 young healthy male subjects were exposed to either a standardized psychosocial laboratory stressor, tier social stress test, or a control condition in a crossover manner. After both treatments, retrieval of a word list learned 24 hours earlier containing 10 neutral, 10 negative, and 10 positive words was tested. The stressor induced a significant increase in salivatory-free cortisol and a decrease in mood. Memory retrieval, free recall, was significantly impaired after the stress condition. Now we know that social isolation and hardships, like poverty, cause stress in children, retarded or not. Effectively, stress janks your cortisol levels in the process. We know that jank cortisol levels have an effect on your overall body standard, including your cognitive ability, specifically your working memory, as I have just given several examples of. Now, I'm going to ask you to use your own working memory to recall at least one thing that I mentioned at the beginning of my intro video, that the WISC test used to analyze a person's IQ, the WISC test being the test that was analyzing the suburban and urban children's IQs. It was one of 5 factors that was measured, actually. I'll give you a little bit of time. And now I will replay the video clip that I'm talking about. Next, we move on to the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, or WISC. It was designed for children ages 6 to 16, and it takes about 45 to 65 minutes. It measures 5 primary index scores that consist of verbal comprehension, visual spatial, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Working memory, working memory, working memory. That's right, working memory. So, for the people in the peanut gallery, I will reiterate for you a few simple facts. We know that IQ can change. We also know that those children in urban settings growing up in homes with struggling socioeconomic status tend to score low as well. This can be chalked up to a few reasons: the lack of crucial social interactions with parental figures doesn't really help them in terms of cognitive development, but also this lack of social interaction can stress them out. Also, we know that the impoverished setting that they are perpetually in can contribute to the stress. Stress affects your working memory, which is one of the things that the WISC test analyzes for when calculating for your IQ. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only reason for a discrepancy in IQ scores. I'm not even saying that it's significant across the board. But since narratives are based on averages and generalizations, I'm saying a little nuance might matter in this context. Keep a lookout for the next part of this series. It won't be next week. Compiling all of this data takes a while, and since a shit ton of time is going into both my internship and going back to school next week, I cannot. If you like what I do with my channel, maybe consider checking out the Patreon, Maker, Teespring, and Amazon links in the description if you feel so inclined. If you like what I do, but maybe not necessarily that much, that's cool. You can still like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. Smiley face. Peace.
Hey Weebo, did I leave my stuff in my room?
I don't know. Did you leave your stuff in your room?
Can I get into my room?
You have to go through me first.
Oh god. Weebo, please. Please, Weebo.
It's actually really slippery. You guys do a nice job waxing your floors.
Thanks.
Let's go, bitch.
Can I get there now?
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
My water broke. I'm crowning. I'm too young to give birth. Let's go to the house. I gave birth. Let's go. Let's watch TV. It's fine. Leave him there. Wait. What are the words?
Bavatissimo!
No, battissimo?
Bavatissimo.
Bavatissimo! Uma ba 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 ba.
It's the circle of life! Hey Weebo.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I have no idea, honestly. I just had this brilliant idea.
Honestly, I don't think anyone does. Clearly, that's why Twitter has problems.
Hang on, my pillow's falling out of my jacket. Did you just sex mock me?
Look, Weebo took me out for my birthday and got me ice cream.
Yeah, it did. Now we're sharing it like a married couple.
She made them
I have no
sing
sexual
for me.
attraction for you at all.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how it goes.
I find
Thanks.
vaginas repulsive.
That's good, me too. I'm glad that that's been agreed upon.
I like dick.
We are out in public. Goodbye.